Life is a mistake, a cosmic accident that society and religion try to cover up with false promises. This is not just any view, it is the radical thinking of Albert Caraco, one of the darkest and most forgotten philosophers of the 20th century. While most thinkers seek to find meaning in existence, Caraco went in the opposite direction. For him, living was a tragedy without redemption, and everything we build, from morality to faith, is just a distraction to avoid facing the inevitable. But who was Albert Caraco? And why does his thinking, so extreme and brutal, still resonate today? Get ready for an uncomfortable philosophical journey where we will explore the absolute pessimism of a man who saw reality without filters. If you've ever questioned the meaning of life or felt that everything around you is a big act, this video is for you. Leave a like, comment on your views, and subscribe for more deep reflections. Now let's dive into the chaos of existence, according to Albert Caraco. Albert Caraco saw life as a fundamental error, a mistake that should never have happened. For him, we exist not because of a greater purpose or design, but because of a cosmic accident that resulted in the worst of absurdities, human consciousness. Unlike philosophers who try to make sense of suffering or find beauty in chaos, Caraco saw no possible redemption. Life was a burden, and everything we had built, civilizations, religions, moral values, was nothing more than a theater to cover up this unbearable truth. His worldview is an extreme development of philosophical pessimism. Influenced by Schopenhauer and Theoren, Caraco rejected any attempt to embellish existence. He saw humanity as a miscalculation of nature, a species doomed to destruction, either by moral collapse or technological self-destruction. Progress, instead of liberating us, only accelerated our ruin. For Caraco, society was a game of lies, a stage where we pretend that life has meaning. Work, family, success, culture. These are all distractions from facing the brutal reality. The world has no direction or purpose, and we exist for no reason. Each generation is born, struggles to survive, suffers, and disappears, leaving room for the next to repeat the same meaningless cycle. The very fact that we continue to exist was, for him, a sign of our refusal to accept the truth. What about religion? Caraco was relentless in his criticism. For him, faith was the greatest of deceptions, a psychological placebo created to comfort the weak. God was nothing more than a human invention to calm the dread of emptiness. The paradise promised by religions was a convenient illusion, a way of making the masses accept their suffering without revolt. But the reality is cold and indifferent. There is no salvation, no divine plan, and any attempt to seek meaning is just a way of avoiding despair. However, Caraco didn't stop there. He believed that if existence is a mistake, there is only one rational solution to this problem, and that solution, bleak and extreme. If life is a mistake, then why do we continue to insist on it? For Albert Caraco, the answer was direct and brutal. There is no logical reason to prolong suffering. If everything that surrounds us is a theater of illusions created to mask the absurdity of existence, then the only coherent attitude would be to stop this mistake before it gets worse. Caraco's pessimism was not limited to philosophical discontent. He took it to the extreme, considering the very extinction of humanity as the only solution to the problem of life. For him, insisting on existence was foolish, a childish refusal to face the truth. If life has no meaning and only generates pain, then why not end it once and for all? Death, in his mind, was not a tragic event or one to be feared, but the only truly lucid and rational act. In his posthumous book, Post Mortem, Caraco reflects on the finitude of life with disturbing coldness, arguing that resistance to nothingness is just a demonstration of childish fear of the unknown. Unlike Camus, who proposed a revolt against the absurd, Caraco thought this stance was naive. Human beings shouldn't fight against the absurd. They should accept it and act coherently. Suicide, for Caraco, was not an act of emotional despair, but a philosophical decision, a gesture of clarity in the face of chaos. He believed that most people don't just take their own lives out of cowardice or social conditioning, because we are trained from an early age to believe that life has some value. Society and religion convince us that we must persist, that there is something to be found in the future, that there is a hidden purpose that we don't yet understand. But for Caraco, this hope was just another cruel illusion. Death, in this sense, would be the only true way out for those who understood reality without filters. After all, why prolong suffering that will never have any meaning? Why continue participating in a theater where the only certainty is pain? If life is a meaningless prison, then the only real freedom would be to reject it. His thought is disconcerting because it takes pessimism to the absolute extreme. While other philosophers tried to find alternatives, even within an absurd world, Caraco believed that there is nothing to be salvaged in existence. Unlike Sioran, who flirted with the idea of suicide but found a certain humor in the absurdity of life, Caraco saw no possibility of redemption. His coldness is shocking, as he not only argues in favor of the end, but treats it as a natural consequence of his philosophy, and he followed his own ideas to the end. Shortly after the death of his parents, Albert Caraco took his own life, ruthlessly fulfilling what he stood for. Unlike many thinkers who discuss nihilism and pessimism only in theoretical terms, Caraco lived and died according to his principles. However, this view raises disturbing questions. Is death really the only answer? Is there no other way to face life without falling into total hopelessness? For Caraco, society and religion only serve to mask the unbearable truth that we live in systems with great collective lies. For Albert Caraco, society and religion are structured lies, human inventions that try to make sense of what is meaningless. He saw these institutions as mechanisms of distraction created to prevent the individual from facing the harshest truth: life is a mistake and suffering is inevitable. His attacks on these structures are fierce and relentless. For Caraco, society is nothing more than a factory of illusions. From birth, we are trained to follow rules, seek success, form families, and fit into production systems, all under the promise that there is a greater purpose to our actions. But for him, that purpose simply doesn't exist. We work to maintain a self-perpetuating system, not because it leads to any real progress, but because we don't know what to do in the face of the emptiness of existence. Religion, on the other hand, is seen as an even crueler lie. If society at least keeps us busy, religion creates a comforting fantasy, promising an afterlife, a hidden meaning, or a divine plan that would explain all suffering. But for Caraco, God is a dangerous illusion because it makes people passively accept their fate without questioning the absurdity of existence. Caraco believed that society was a poorly rehearsed play where each individual plays a role they didn't choose. From an early age, we are taught that we should study, work, raise a family, and contribute to progress. But what actually happens? Work exhausts us, the family imprisons us, and progress is a cyclical illusion that never leads anywhere. For him, there is no glorious destiny awaiting humanity. On the contrary, we are heading towards our own destruction, be it ecological collapse, overpopulation, or war. Everything we build is just a postponement of the inevitable. Empires fall, ideologies run out of steam, economies collapse, and humanity continues to delude itself generation after generation, believing that it is going somewhere. The irony, according to Caraco, is that society not only deceives us about the meaning of life, but also prevents us from facing the only logical solution, the refusal of existence itself. The system keeps us busy and distracted so that we can never stop and reflect on the absurdity of it all. If everyone accepted its philosophy, the world would collapse. That's why society needs us to keep believing in the lie of progress. If society is an illusion, religion is the anaesthetic that prevents people from feeling the despair of the truth. For Caraco, all religions are human constructions created to avoid the fear of death and justify suffering. He believed that faith was a symptom of cowardice, a refuge for those who can't bear the idea that there is no purpose, no heaven, no new beginning. Caraco rejected any kind of spirituality. For him, the idea of a benevolent God was absurd in the face of human suffering. If God existed, then he would be indifferent, cruel, or completely incompetent. And if there is no higher being guiding us, then all religious morality collapses. There is no sin, no destiny, no divine justice. There is only chance and chaos. He was particularly critical of the promises of life after death. For him, this belief is one of the biggest lies ever invented. Paradise, rebirth, reincarnation. All these ideas are just ways of convincing people to accept their suffering, postponing any real search for liberation. Religion doesn't teach us to live better, but rather to endure pain with the false hope of a future reward. For Caraco, the only way to face reality head-on would be to destroy these illusions. But here a problem arises. If society and religion collapsed, what would be left? Only pure despair and the acceptance of emptiness. And that's why, according to him, these lies continue to be sustained. Without them, the chaos would be unbearable. The problem is that this flight from the truth comes at a price. The more humanity clings to these artificial structures, the further it moves away from its only real way out. If life is a mistake, then to continue with it is to prolong suffering. Society and religion not only hide this truth, but also ensure that the cycle continues indefinitely. The big question then is, if we reject all these illusions, is there anything that can replace them? Is there a path beyond pure despair? The world has changed a lot since Albert Caraco's time, but his ideas are still as relevant as ever. If he saw society as an organized lie and religion as a cowardly escape, what can we say about the modern world? Does his extreme pessimism still make sense at a time when technology, globalization, and scientific advancement should have brought us more answers and purpose? The answer is uncomfortable. Despite all the progress, we are still just as lost as before, or perhaps even more so. The existential emptiness that Caraco saw hasn't disappeared, it's just changed shape. If before people took refuge in religion and tradition, today we seek distraction in consumption, social networks, and the cult of productivity. The promise of progress lives on, but its fragility is more evident than ever. The contemporary world, dominated by ecological crises, political conflicts, and a growing epidemic of mental disorders, reflects many of Caraco's darkest predictions. Science advances but gives us no purpose. Technology connects but isolates. Material abundance has not eliminated human suffering, it has only reshaped it. Thus, the idea that civilization is a futile theatre to mask the despair of existence has never seemed more plausible. The crisis of modern society between progress and despair. Caraco argued that society is a fragile structure, sustained by collective illusions. What happens when these illusions begin to crumble? Today we live in an era of constant uncertainty, where the grand narratives that used to give life meaning, religion, ideologies, family, work, are being questioned or losing relevance. Let's take work as an example. For centuries we were taught that working hard and producing would give us a dignified life and a purpose. But today, more and more people realize that they work just to survive, often in empty jobs with no meaning or recognition. The so-called crisis of meaning at work reflects exactly what Caraco denounced. The system doesn't care about the individual, only about their function within the machine. Politics is another example. Ideologies collapse, leaders change, but the structural problems remain. Caraco saw civilization as a house of cards about to collapse, and looking at the global political and economic chaos, his predictions seem less paranoid and more prophetic. But perhaps the most relevant point is the psychological impact of this reality. The exponential increase in depression, anxiety, and suicide in recent years shows that more and more people are feeling the weight of this existential emptiness. Even surrounded by comfort and technology, many people experience a profound sense of meaninglessness, exactly what Caraco said was the inevitable fate of humanity. If religions were once the main tool for masking this emptiness, today we have a new kind of salvation, the culture of entertainment and hyperconnectivity. Social networks, games, endless series, and the unbridled consumption of information create a parallel reality where we never have to stop to reflect on the emptiness of existence. Caraco argued that civilization keeps us distracted so that we never question the meaning of life. What would he say if he saw today's world where we spend hours in front of screens, immersed in information bubbles, escaping reality at all costs? If religion once promised eternal life in paradise, today technology offers us an infinite escape from reality. But the great irony is that even with all these distractions, the void is still there. We can ignore it for a while, but it always returns. And deep down, we all know it. Faced with all this, the inevitable question arises, was Caraco right? If life really is a mistake and society is just a mechanism to mask despair, then is there no way out? Is there nothing we can do but accept the absurdity and wait for the inevitable collapse? The answer depends on how we interpret his thinking. On the one hand, his critique of the modern world is incredibly accurate. Society really does function as a great collective illusion, and progress has not solved the existential questions that have always plagued humanity. On the other hand, his extreme fatalism can be questioned. Even if life doesn't have a cosmic purpose, does that mean it can't have value? Instead of denying existence, shouldn't we try to find beauty in it, even if it's meaningless? Philosophers like Camus argued that even in the face of absurdity, we can still create our own meaning. And this is perhaps the only way to respond to Caraco's absolute pessimism without falling into complete hopelessness. If Albert Caraco was right, then existence is just a mistake, and any attempt to find meaning in it is just a convenient illusion. But is absolute pessimism the only possible answer? Or is there an alternative path that doesn't require a flight into religion or a total collapse into despair? This is not a new question. Many philosophers have confronted the same dilemma. If life is absurd, what should we do about it? Camus believed that the answer was to revolt against the absurd. In other words, to accept that life has no intrinsic meaning and yet continue living, creating our own meaning. Nietzsche, for his part, rejected passive nihilism and defended the idea of the Superman, the one who is capable of constructing his own values and transcending the morals imposed by society. Caraco, however, rejected these solutions. For him, both Camus and Nietzsche were still, in a way, trying to give a veneer of hope to the chaos of existence. His vision was more radical. There is no meaning to be created, no morality to be reconstructed. There is only the fundamental error of life. But did he completely ignore the possibility of living authentically, even in the face of emptiness? Perhaps the answer lies not in seeking an absolute truth, but in adopting a different stance in the face of uncertainty. If we accept that life is an accident with no purpose, we have two options: give up or continue living, but without the illusions. The question is, does the fact that something has no cosmic purpose mean that it has no value? Let's take art as an example. No work of art has an objective, universal purpose, but does that mean it has no value? On the contrary, its beauty lies precisely in the fact that it is a human creation, the expression of a moment, an emotion, an idea. Life can be seen in the same way. We don't need it to have a divine purpose in order to experience moments of intensity, beauty, and even subjective meaning. Caraco saw society and religion as lies, and he may have been right about that. But wasn't his total refusal to experience life also a form of blindness? After all, even if suffering is inevitable, does that mean that moments of joy and discovery are irrelevant? Many modern philosophers have explored this idea. Zygmunt Bauman, for example, argues that we live in a time of liquid uncertainty, where the old structures of meaning are crumbling. However, rather than falling into despair, he suggests that we must learn to live with this uncertainty, accepting that meaning does not come from outside, but from the individual choices we make in the present. In other words, we don't need an absolute truth to live, we can simply live. Even though his vision is extreme, Caraco teaches us something important. You have to have the courage to face reality without illusions. Many people live trapped in dogmas, empty beliefs, and false promises because they are afraid of emptiness. It forces us to face the essential question: if all this is a lie, how do we choose to live? Perhaps the answer is not to accept death as the only solution, but to transform this brutal awareness into a stimulus to live more authentically. This means breaking with imposed standards, questioning inherited values, and creating our own path. If life is a mistake, let it be a mistake lived with intensity. If there is no meaning, let us embrace the absurdity instead of running away from it. In the end, perhaps Caraco has taken his own philosophy too far, forgetting that even in a purposeless world, we can still create our own meanings, however small they may be. What about you? How do you view the idea of a meaningless existence? Do you think Caraco was right, or is there more to it than pessimism? Leave a comment and share your views. Albert Caraco was not just a pessimistic thinker, he was a radical of nihilism, a man who saw life without any filter and had the courage to take it to its ultimate consequences. For him, existence was a mistake, society was a theater of illusions, and religion was a comforting lie. The only dignified way out? The voluntary end of his own life. But now that we've gone through his ideas, a fundamental question arises: what do we do with this knowledge? Should we accept his verdict and embrace despair? Or on the contrary, can his philosophy serve as a warning for us to take a different approach to life? Was Caraco right? Caraco's thinking is hard to refute when we look at the world around us. We live trapped in a system that consumes us, surrounded by distractions that prevent us from facing the void, while religion and morality try to convince us that it all has some purpose. But deep down, we all know that there are no definitive answers. Caraco's problem was not his analysis, which is brutally honest at many points, but his conclusion. Could it be that the only way forward in the face of absurdity is to give up completely? Other philosophers, like Camus, would argue that even without meaning, life can still be lived. Nietzsche would tell us that instead of surrendering to nihilism, we should create our own values. Even Sioran, one of the darkest thinkers of the 20th century, flirted with humor and irony in the face of the absurdity of existence. Caraco's mistake may have been to believe that without an absolute purpose, nothing else had value. But the fact that life doesn't have a universal meaning doesn't mean that it can't have moments that are worthwhile. If there's anything we can learn from Caraco, it's that life without illusions is hard. Society sells empty promises, religion tries to calm the fear of nothingness, and progress keeps us busy without giving us answers. But what we do in the face of this is an individual choice. We have two options. We can surrender to despair, accept that everything is a mistake and that to go on living is to prolong suffering. This is Caraco's path. Or we can look into the abyss and decide to live anyway, not because life has a hidden meaning, but because, within the chaos, there is still room for authentic experiences, real connections, and moments that, however brief, are profoundly human. If everything is a mistake, let it be a mistake lived with intensity. If life is an accident, let it be an accident that is enjoyed to the last moment. The truth is that there is no definitive answer. Each of us must find our own way of dealing with the absurd. Perhaps Caraco went too far. Maybe he was just honest to the end. But the question he leaves us with is uncomfortable. If everything around us is an illusion, what keeps us here? What about you? What do you think about that? Do you believe that life is just a mistake, or do you think there is still something worthwhile? Leave a comment and share your vision. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep reflections. The silence of the universe will never give us an answer. It's up to us to decide how to live with it.